We have one item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council reporting out of closed session. The motion for the item is to receive the report and that the report be referred back to staff.
Thank you. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Weiss, Councillor Gardner. Any comments, questions? None. Recorded vote.
Recorded vote has been requested for the only item of council reporting out of closed session this evening. Councillor Thompson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson votes yes. Councillor Gardner? Yes. Councillor Gardner votes yes. Councillor Gilliland? Councillor Gilliland votes yes. Councillor Weiss? Councillor Weiss votes yes. Councillor Kim?
Yes.
Councillor Kim votes yes. Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
And Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gallo votes yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. Confirming bylaw. I'd like to move that. Councillor Gallo, Councillor Weiss, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Weiss, Councillor Kim, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Gallo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Clerk, the time is 7, well, depending on where you're looking at, 7:06. On Tuesday, November 7th, 2023, I'd like to call this General Committee meeting to order. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territories of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here today continues to this day. As the closest First Nations community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as Williams Treaty of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Can I please get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Gardner, Councillor Gilliland, any comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we have no community presentations. We have no delegations this evening. And we have no consent agenda. Can I please get a motion to receive items 8.1 to 8.4 for information? Councillor Gilliland, Mayor Maracus, any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Number 9, items requiring separate discussion. I believe we have a presentation for item 9.1. Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, who is doing? Oh, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my distinct pleasure to present the Town of Aurora's 2024 to 2026 operating budget and 10-year capital plan. This budget prioritizes maintaining current services and making strategic investments, all while respecting taxpayer dollars. Like all organizations and businesses across Canada, the town has faced significant inflationary pressures over the last year, resulting in rising costs to deliver the programs, services, and projects our community relies on. At the same time, residents have seen their own costs go up, from groceries to gas to mortgage payments. Considering all of these, it was important that this year's increase was moderate and stayed roughly at the projected 2023 overall inflation rate. That's why this budget proposes a 3.9% increase on the tax bill in 2024, followed by 3.5% in 2025 and 2.9% in 2026. This increase ensures everything from our incredible recreational programs to road work to town-led events are maintained at current levels. and that we are able to continue to provide the support our key partners need, including the Aurora Public Library, Central York Fire Services, and the Aurora Cultural Center. This year's budget process is different due to recent changes in Ontario legislation. The Ontario government's Bill 3 Strong Mayors Building Homes Act granted strong mayor powers to many municipalities, including Aurora. These new responsibilities given to mayors are largely aimed to accelerating the housing and development process at the municipal level. But it also changes the budget process too. Traditionally, the municipal budget has been presented by the Chief Administrative Officer, but the new legislation now requires mayors to present the budget. And I want to be very clear. Presenting the budget is a responsibility I take very seriously. But it's also important to note that all councillors have the opportunity to propose amendments to this budget, which is a critical part of the process. So I look forward to their feedback, and I'm committed to working collaboratively with all of council to ensure this budget works in the best interests of all Aurorans, and we can continue to get things done. Importantly, this budget proposes that we continue to move forward on key projects and programs that enhance the quality of life for Aurorans, like finishing Aurora Town Square and ensuring it has the right funding in place to provide Aurorans with top-notch arts and culture programming, or the 7,500 square foot expansion to the Stronach Aurora Recreation Complex, and the replacement of aging playgrounds at Fleury Park and Evans Park, and the playground and splash pad at Town Park as we move to make our playgrounds truly accessible. To respond to the growing demands for more pickleball opportunities, this budget proposes court improvements at both Edward Coltham and Trent Park, while also constructing a second artificial turf field at Shepherd's Bush in partnership with the Aurora Barbarian rugby team, as well as an artificial turf at the new Dr. G.W. Williams Secondary School on Bayview Avenue. And to encourage and support active and healthy lifestyles, this budget proposes more multi-use trail construction to make it easier for residents to get around town on foot, bike, or scooter. And we are responding to the needs of some of our most vulnerable community members by funding new programs like our windrow removal pilot program that clears the snow at the end of the driveway for seniors and those living with a disability. To ensure Aurorans can get around town quickly and safely, we're making major investments to improve sidewalk and road conditions, including the reconstruction of Poplar Crescent and the rehabilitation of the road surfaces on Avondale Crescent, Center Street, and Earl Stewart Drive, to name just a few. Importantly, we are also making investments in new technology projects to make it easier for residents to access our services, including managing their tax and water bills online. Now, this is just a snippet, but taken as a whole, this budget helps ensure Aurora remains a safe, healthy, dynamic, and modern town that has an incredibly high quality of life and that makes key investments for future generations. This budget is the result of a tremendous amount of teamwork with staff, residents, and businesses, all providing input on priorities during our pre-budget consultations. Ultimately, this budget is for the people. It has been developed to ensure that we are being fiscally responsible, providing for the needs of our community, not just for the present, but for future generations. One that will continue to build on the investments to revitalize our downtown and support the growth of our economy. I want to thank everyone for their input and their commitment to helping make Aurora one of the best places to live, work, and raise a family in the entire GTHA. Mr. Chair, just before I pass it over to our treasurer.
I'll pass it over to her.
Well, thank you. I did want to bring up fact that I'm very proud to share that our 2023 budget document has been awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from Government Finance Officers Association, or the GFOA. Now, the GFOA awards are given to municipalities who meet the highest government budgeting and financial reporting standards. This is the first time that we've applied for and won the GFOA award. This award is a testament to the town's commitment to excellence in business planning and financial reporting. So at this moment, I'd request that Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel come forward as well as other members of her team so I could present the award to them.
Thank you. Perhaps in the future, we can have these things on the agenda under presentations. Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel, I think you have a presentation. Thank you for. We'd love to hear from those who actually put the budget together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my honor to present the budget this evening. So let's just get started. It's not. There we go. Okay. So just a quick overview, we'll look at both operating capital, the impacts on the tax levy, reserves, and debt management, similar format to what we've seen in the past. So as you know, for our budget process, it does align with the overall term of council. We are in year 2, so we are looking to adopt a budget for the remaining 3 years of the council term. This provides a high-level overview with the tax levy impacts, as mentioned by the mayor earlier, with 3.9% in 24, 3.5% in the second year, and 2.9% in the final year of the budget. At this time, our capital expenditures, we're looking at $62.5 million to be spent in 2024, and new capital budget authority at $33.3 million. So that puts our total capital plan at just over $300 million, but we are not asking for any further debt at this time. The impact on our household. So the average household on MPAC actually is around 800,000. I know it's hard to believe, but that does not reflect market values at all. And this was MPAC's valuations back in 2016. So the average impact would be about $95 on the tax bill for 2024 and a little bit less in each of the following years with the lower percentages. The increase, the water bills, our bills are issued every 3 months, average of 54 cubic meters of water. And the increase in 2024 would be looking at $16.98. 25 is $19.62, and in 2026, $19.26. So jumping into the operating budget. So this gives you a very high-level overview of where we are at for each of the departments. We'll be getting into a lot more details about the departments next week on Monday when we have our budget committee meeting. As you know, each year as a municipality, we are required to present a balanced budget. So that means everything that we have planned expenditures, we must also have planned funding. Most of the funding is coming from tax sources, with the next largest amount of funding from user rates. So those are the rates paid for water, wastewater, and stormwater services. Largest amount of spending is salaries and benefits, and then program costs, which is generally materials and supplies and contracts required to deliver the services that we have. When we look at our overall gross spending versus net budget, we can see on a net budget basis, Central York Fire Services is the largest share of our tax levy at 21.8% of the overall levy. And when we look, oh, that did not. Okay. Is this just PowerPoint? Sorry, this was a build slide, so it's throwing me off a little bit. But the greatest amount of actual spending is in operational services. And one of the big reasons for that is we have both roads, waste, and we also have water, wastewater, and stormwater services in operational services. So a large portion of their budget is covered through user rates rather than tax. This gives you a bit of a picture of the overall tax levy budget over the next 3 years. So we're looking at how we categorize a number of our expenditures, whether it be base, which is typically inflationary pressures. We have our fiscal strategy, which includes our 1% plus some multi-year contingency in the outer years. And then we have capital impact of new projects that are coming on board, followed by enhancements. So typically our capital impact and our enhancements or service level changes are covered through the assessment growth, which we're forecasting at 1.2% per year. The fiscal strategy does look a little bit different in the further years out, and that's because we have some tax levy funded debt, which is coming to an end, which should be converted to asset management contributions. And we also have the producer responsibility for waste savings, which is resulting in a lot of savings on our base inflationary pressures, but we're then contributing those overall into asset management contributions to support long-term asset growth. Here is an overview of the tax levy budget. It's similar to what was just shown graphically. It also shows you where our staffing requests are. So we do have some staffing requests related to growth, some that are related to capital, and some are service level changes or new services that we're offering. Inflation is a big story, and as it has been in the last couple of years. And just to take a moment to look at what we have here, that's dotted dashed green line is the economic 2% that the government tends to strive for overall. As you can see, that solid line is where inflation has been trending over the last few years since before the pandemic started. The green shaded is where we are doing, how we are doing on a budget basis. So we are always continually looking for enhancement efficiencies and being able to use tax dollars effectively. So you can see there is that gap. But there is some of that gap is causing a bit of challenges. We do have a lot of contracts that are multi-year in nature, so we've been able to maintain a lot of our costs from that perspective. But some of that is a bit pent up, and we're starting to see as we're issuing new contracts, costs are starting to increase at a higher rate that we have seen in the past. So that's smoothing some of that impact over the next few years. There are a number of levy drivers in the budget. So a lot of the base pressures come from inflationary pressures, which relate to salaries and benefits, partially offset by some savings and also increases in revenues for the services that we're providing on an inflationary manner. So then we also have our new capital. So those include things such as Aurora Town Square coming online, the Sark Gym construction completing and that coming online. We have some new systems. And we also have our disposal fees for waste, dog waste receptacles. And then the fiscal strategy has a little bit more going on in it than it has in the past with the producer responsibility for waste, contributing to asset management, as well as the completion of the LED debt. Growth, we do have some growth in our community programs, so those are offset by a number of revenues as well. And we also have growth in parks and road operations. So those do also include some staffing requests, permanent and seasonal staffing. And then we're also seeing some growth in our fleet in accordance with that too. One of the big things that's included in the budget this year is more of a focus on asset management and how we manage our assets. Currently, for asset management, the town of Aurora does not have any dedicated staff just focused on asset management. And this budget over the 3-year period of time plans to correct that and to actually get some people that are more focused on ensuring that we're managing assets properly and that we're making the right investment decisions at the right time. So this is going to take staff from across multiple departments to work together to be able to do these things. And it's going to help with our operationalization of the asset management plan and that will be coming to council next year with the remaining elements of the second generation plan. There's also new public sector accounting standards relating to tangible capital assets. And again, it's going to make sure that we effectively use our money over the long term. We also have looked in our budget for ways to generate savings. So there are some opportunities in here that we're changing some services, saving some money, so it helps overall mitigate that impact on the tax levy. We also have our partnership with Cultural Services, and as the Aurora Town Square completes, there's going to be more going on and working with them to expand our services and provide programming, and we'll be working closely with them. And more information will come over the next 2 Monday nights as we do our departmental and our cultural partners presentations. So many of the new initiatives do involve staff. So for each of these different types of staff that are requested, there is a business case in the budget binders in the departmental sections, and it provides you an overview of how these new positions are going to help benefit the organization and the types of things that are going to contribute overall to the services that we deliver as a town. So as you can see here, high level, we did have one in-year approval this year for the IT position to support ATS. And in 2024, we are looking at 14 new staff, 4 in 25, and another 3 in 2026. We also have the user rates associated with the water, wastewater, and stormwater budget. So these user rates are set so that we can recover the costs of these services because they have to be self-funded. So they do not get funded through the tax levy. They are funded through the rates that we collect on water bills that are sent out throughout the year. So the new rates are expected to increase. There's a little bit of variability between water and wastewater. We do get some changes with the region and how much they're charging for water, wastewater, but the overall increase from the region on their service is about 3.3% on an annual basis. So when we look at the average residential bill, we can see even though there's a larger increase relating to stormwater, which includes our capital investments required, the overall increase is about 5.2%. in 2024. So key operating budget assumptions, inflation is going to continue to be a big story. We do have the 3.3% annually for water, wastewater rates. And we are using some user rate funding to support the asset management plan, some of those positions that are supported in the budget. Capital. So this year we are looking for $33.3 million in additional capital budget authority. And as you can see here, this is our 10-year overall profile for capital. You can see that the diamond indicates how much we're planning on spending in 2023. So a lot of that difference between what was in the budget is getting pushed into 24. So that's why 24 increases more significantly. In 2033, we don't have as much capital in that year. And the reason for that is there's a lot of work that's happening over the next year relating to asset management. And we want to be able to get before council and understand what service levels we're going to establish for asset management. And once that is done, then we're going to take another look at capital over that 10-year period for the asset management work that's to come. And as you can see from this image here, the 2033 asset management work is actually quite smaller compared to the other years. Our overall assets that we have core assets that are valued at $813 million, largest portion of those being related to buildings and facilities, underground services, and land. So of that $33.3 million that we're requesting in new capital budget authority, $14.6 million is related to roads program, another 4.9 for storm sewer. We also have the 2.8 million for the artificial turf relating to the Aurora Barbarians proposal. And then we were also replacing playgrounds and also doing more work on our facilities. Moving on to reserves and debt management. This shows you an overall projection of where our reserves are going to be over the next 10 years. So the dashed line is our total value of reserves. So you can see that Aurora's reserves are well positioned over the next 10 years. There are a couple of reserves that do dip negative in a couple of those years during the next 10-year period, but that should be able to be well managed. And we can look at these as we go annually, taking another look at our capital plan. The budget does consider some of the changes that are relating to development charges. We have factored it in our revenue forecast that we do for the 10-year period. We have also changed out some of the funding on the projects we know that are no longer to be funded but through development charges. We have not factored in anything relating to the Building Faster Fund. We want to make sure that we understand how much we're actually going to be receiving before we start applying it to projects, but then we can use it to advance projects as we go forward. As you remember, the asset management plan did request substantial increases relating to assets for the different funded areas. The budget does include the funding as recommended in the asset management plan for water, wastewater, and storm. The tax component that will be considered when we do the asset management work next year and we set the service levels, because this was based on a financial metric, not on an actual service level for how the asset performs. Debt repayments over the next 10 years can be seen here. You can see that our tax levy debt is dropping off in 26 and 27. That's the end of the LED debenture. And we do have some more development charge debt that will be coming forward. So our fiscal strategy underpins the budget to make sure that we're looking at the long term and not just the period with the budget is focused on. We do our long-term capital planning. We are looking at reserve management to ensure our capital projects can be well funded in the future. We do take a careful look at debt and how we manage that going forward. And we also, from revenue management, are looking for opportunities to keep the levy increase below the level of inflation. So the next steps. So here we are on November 7th with the presentation. We do have a few Monday meetings coming up next week. On Monday, we will have the departmental presentations. That'll be an opportunity to dig deeper into each of the department's budgets and ask more detailed questions on those. On November 20th, we will have our community partners come in and they will be presenting the budgets for their funding requests. The 23rd is when any amendments to the budget will be required to the clerk's office so that we can have that discussion on November 27th. If there are no amendments, the budget is adopted. If not, then we move into the next stages. And as we know, this is all a new process for all of us. So I'm sure we can work together to make our way along as we go. So thank you. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. And a special thank you to everyone behind the scenes and your team that put all of this together. Thank you. Could I please get a mover and a seconder to put the 9.1 on the floor, that report number FIN 23-0430 be received for information? Councillor Weiss, Councillor Gardner, any comments or questions on item 9.1? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel. I noticed you had a staffing chart and I was a little unclear about what that represented. And I believe you answered me an email, but if I could just get a little more clarity that the price and the costing of that was reflective of July 1st. So 6 months within the first year for those 14 staff, but we really don't know what the full impact is on an annual basis because it's just showing us a 6-month view. Thought perhaps you could kind of expand on how we would see that moving forward and what those costs and the impacts actually are.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the slide that shows the staffing changes shows the impact in that year for
What
that.
number slide is that? What number slide?
It is 18.
Thank you.
Shows the impact in that year for the position. Sorry, 18 is just the number, the total counts. 11.
11.
Okay.
46,
Are you-
page
I'm
46 of the report.
Oh, okay. So through you, Mr. Chair, so that slide or that table, what it shows is the overall net impact. And if you want to see the full impact and the full salary amounts, they are included in the business cases in the departmental sections. Many of the new positions do start July 1st. So we'll only have a half-year impact in the first year, and the rest of the impact will happen in the following years, with the exception of, I believe, the Aurora Town Square positions, which are a full year impact because they are planned for January 1st.
Thank you. I'll probably look for more clarity on the actual numbers behind the scenes because I'd like to know what that actual financial impact is. Curious on slide number 24 about the plan is $49.3 million higher this year. Just for the public, I understand that you had mentioned that it's much higher this year because it moved over from 2023, 2024, but yet there's nothing showing in the graph for capital budget or what it was. Is there any indication of where we estimated and where we underestimate, what that number, what that difference is? Because I don't see that transition. I see a blank line.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So on the slide 24, the graph there, it does show how the difference on an annual basis. When we look at the full 10 years, the overall 10 years really hasn't changed that much. It's that what's happening is with that 33 million of new capital budget authority is there's projects that have come out, so that have completed, and then you have new projects with either new or have increases. So we could have had a project that was in and planned to start in 2024 in last year's budget, but we wouldn't have requested the capital budget authority at that time because it was not needed at that time. So there'll be those projects that were in the plan last year, but have now come to that stage where the request is required for that capital budget authority to start making those procurement commitments.
Councillor.
Thank you. And I don't want to go into too many questions because I know we have budget and we'll get to ask a lot of these questions. I've had some public ask about public input and how they could become engaged. I'm really curious as to this process. I really don't understand what we're in for when it comes to budget next Monday, how it's going to be formatted. And the public would like to know how they can become engaged and how they can delegate and how they can put in some input into this budget should they want to.
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel or
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, they can get in touch with us at clerks@aurora.ca. We'll be happy to provide them with the delegation request form prior to next week's meeting.
Thank you. So I guess they could delegate at any budget and at any council or any GC if they had any concerns about the budget. Thank you. I know this is a question that maybe can't be answered right away, but this was one of the questions and it is in your slide. So I am going to ask. I understand that the Phragmites of the 75,000 was considered a savings to the town. However, I would disagree in the sense that it's actually creating a huge risk to our meadows and our wetlands and so forth. So there's a bit of a trade-off, although one is more physical and one's more of a monetary. I'm just curious as to staff's plan. Where do we go from here? Because right now it looks like we're doing nothing. And so I was very shocked to see that as a high level highlighted item that we should be thinking as a huge savings. And I just disagree. Through Mr. Chair to Ms. Teekamp.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the Phragmites program, currently we just haven't been able to tackle it. It's so widespread out there. I think we need a little bit more of a comprehensive plan. That being said, we are still initiating some Phragmites work just through our road side of the business in our stormwater ponds, because there's quite an impact of Phragmites within them. So we are doing some Phragmites treatment there, and we are doing just some spot treatment that we have been carrying through the budget to date. But just the 75,000, we've taken a step back on it because it's just such a large issue. And I think we need a little bit more of a comprehensive plan, and it needs to involve some other partners within the community to really deal with it effectively. So at this time, we're just looking to take a pause on it and then come back to council with some future recommendations on it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Well, hopefully there's some granting opportunities or partnerships with higher levels of government or organizations. I know that I'd point you in that direction. My only comment is it's a little too late and we should have taken this on a lot sooner. People didn't take it seriously. And that if anybody is concerned about climate change, this is just something, in my opinion, that should not be falling off the wagon. The number one thing that Dr. Feltman has said is protect your wetlands. Flooding is the number one thing that we should be really focusing on with some of the wild weather that we're getting. We have seen a lot of that happen on our streets. It's not uncommon. So I'm just really disappointed that this is something that we're backbenching, because I really do fundamentally believe these are one of the things that we should be getting a hold on. And obviously it's spun out of control, and we should really be taking a closer look at ensuring we can keep pushing forward as opposed to allowing this to continue to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weiss, please.
Thank you. And congratulations on the award. It's always been a pleasure to sit with you and talk about numbers. So The only thing beyond what has been said before, and we're going to get into the weeds a little bit later when we talk about budget, but I'm interested in the budget you have on number 12 on your presentation, but it also appears as number 6 of 12 in the report. The budget that you have shaded in green there, and it says it excludes fiscal strategy and the ATS debt. Now, those are all operating costs. Why have those not been put in budget? You know, I'm sure you have an explanation, but I'd just like to hear what it is. And could you tell me what those debt numbers are?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr.
Sorry.
Chair. So the reason that it was excluding the ATS debt and the fiscal strategy is because those are not typically the inflationary type pressures. So for the purpose of looking at this graph, we really wanted to marry up what is our inflationary impact overall compared to where we're seeing inflation in the market at this time. So by including those, it would have skewed the town's numbers a little bit because it's not something that's directly tied in that manner. The fiscal strategy is our 1% that we add into the levy each year. And the ATS debt, we have $510,000 in the budget, and that was levied over a 2-year period. I think it was in 2020 and 21.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk more about it later.
Thank you, Councillor Kim.
Mr. Chair, just a top level question regarding the asset management plan. The asset management plan is a big part of our capital budget, and the question I have is in terms of trying to assess the condition of our assets. You know, there's 2 ways to determine that is, you know, age-based and field-based analysis. You know, we've been going through the asset management plan for 5 or 6 years now, and we were one of the first municipalities to go ahead with it. What have we learned in the last 5, 6 years in terms of our budgeting or predictability of the aging of our assets, and how accurate have we been? Because the accuracy of our replacement costs, our degradation of our assets, whether it be roads, sewers, and so forth, the predictability of that and how accurate we are makes it a big difference in terms of our the budgeting of our asset management plan. So, can someone speak to that?
Ms. Wainwright Van Kessel?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the work that we've done so far on the asset management plan has done an evaluation of how much the cost overall would be, but it's based on financial terms. So this is looking at financial amortization periods for assets, which does not necessarily reflect the actual useful life of an asset that we can get. So what's going to happen is in next year, when we bring the asset management plan, we are going to be doing the next stages. So as you remember in last term, one of the things that we looked at was defining the actual metrics that we're going to use to determine the service level of the assets. What's happening now is the work that's underway is going to help us determine as a council what those service levels should be and how those service levels will tie into financially the budget going forward. Then once we establish those service levels, it will give us the information that we need to determine when the assets get replaced. Based on how they meet those service levels are going to be more operationally based and not just a financial amortization period.
Mr. Kim?
Thank you.
Just on that, would it not be broken down to some of our assets that are not necessarily linked to a service level? We have many assets in the town that aren't necessarily linked to a service level, and surely we've put an end of life and a dollar figure towards those assets that don't require any particular service level. To you, I guess.
To you, Mr. Chair. So each asset does have its own service level. When we talk about service level, we're not talking necessarily services out to the public, but we're talking about how the serviceability of the asset. So for example, with roads, we have a condition index. So one of the things is going to be, do we change our condition index, and what condition index do we try to maintain? And that would be the service level we'd establish for that asset. Whereas if you look at something for like laptops, computers, that might be set in more of a number of years that we would keep those assets because of how well they perform. So each asset class is going to have its own separate service level. And the team is working on that now across the organization with our consultants to try and establish what that service level should be for each of those different types of assets. So far we've determined what the measures are going to be for linear assets, but this is actually determining for the rest of the assets, including facilities, playgrounds, and many of the other assets that we have.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Item 9.2. Could I please get a motion, a mover and a seconder for facility allocation policy review? One, that report number CMS 23-049 be received, and two, that the facility allocation policy be approved as presented. Councillor Weiss, your seconder. Councillor Thompson, comments or questions? Councillor Weiss.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions and a few comments. I really like the policies that have been, the changes in there. I like the movement towards not-for-profits, so that's a great idea. Plus adult programs prior to not-for-profits of all kinds, and that the legacy provisions are being extended only to Aurora-based groups, so that's also good. But I am concerned a couple of things, and I think I brought it up before to Mr. Furman, and maybe it's going to be answered in here. I'm concerned with some of the latitudes that are being expended to the spirit of the NFPs, meaning some of the not-for-profits come and ask for allocations, but they're not really a not-for-profit. They're not incorporated that way, but they are in the spirit. So I liked your answer before, but I'm concerned about who and how that's going to be applied. And give me an idea of how often it happens as well. I don't know if it's an inundation or it's what it is, but through you to whoever can answer that question.
I'm going to probably say, Mr. Furman, do you mind coming up? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It doesn't come up very often. There's a handful of groups that we're aware of that operate in the spirit of nonprofit, and that's typically it's some of your adult pickup leagues where they're volunteer run. Volunteers take the time to put it together, organize the group, collect the fees, and book the permits. But they haven't gone to the expense and the trouble of formally incorporating as a nonprofit incorporation, and they're certainly not a registered charity. So those organizations, we know through dialogue with them that they're not making profit. This is not a business for them. They've been the person in that group who's stepped up to organize it on behalf of the people that want to participate. And those are the people that we want to capture in this as a nonprofit organization and afford them that same courtesy.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the handful, so it's not an onerous task for you. You don't have hundreds of them. There's a few of them that are doing that, so that's great. I asked previously about defining the resident status too, and I don't think I was very clear about what I wanted to ask, but I'm not asking you to define what a resident is because we know it, but the sport organizations have come up and said, well, we have these groups of people who may appear to be resident by virtue of the person who applies for the permit, but many of the people on the team or on the organization are not, or considered not residents, or they don't know if they are or not. Can you tell me how that's going to be managed?
Mr. Furman?
Through Mr. Chair, certainly, if it's an organized group, a group doesn't get resident status based on the person who books the permit. We look at the membership of the organization. So if a youth organization has to have 70% or greater of their members being Aurora residents to be considered Aurora based, and then they get the resident status. We do have individuals, where this may come up in some of the questions I've heard is an individual just books a field here and there on their own. And they may book, they may be an Aurora resident and they may book the field, but many of the people playing with them are non-residents. In that case, they're booking as an individual, which is actually the final category in the allocation priority. So everybody who meets those group standards as an Aurora based or a regional representative group, they've all been looked after first. This is now kind of the odds and ends of what's available. Those individual, it may be somebody booking a family soccer game or a friendly based softball game with friends or whatever. Those they're individual bookings. So we don't actually look at who is participating because it's the last category. It's that catch-all because we've addressed all those other issues already.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. And the last one I have is I don't see any consideration in the allocation policies. And I brought this up before to you, having to do with sport tourism. We have that as a strategy. But from an allocation process, we've had a number of people who have come and said, well, I want to book a weekend, and they have to go through their sport governing bodies. They have to get permissions. They have to do all the marketing promotion well in advance of that. So I don't know if it's covered under what you've noticed here as special circumstances, but I really think that there ought to be some accommodation if we're trying to bring people into this community and we're trying to support the sport organizations that are going out through an awful lot of work in order to bring 600 people to our community on a weekend. I think it's important for us not to have an allocation policy that would restrict that. So I'll give you an example. You're aware of this, that somebody at Hallmark Fields, where they want to have they need to have those 2 fields for a tournament over the weekend. Then someone has a booking on a Friday night that precludes them having this. So I'm wondering if there's some provision or if you've talked about any way to do this, to try to have those people who have bona fide sport tourism events to have priority booking so that they can get that booking done and they can start their marketing and their advertising and all the rest of it. Have you thought about how to manage that?
Mr. Furman?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have addressed that. That's addressed more through our practice and procedures rather than in through policy, because it's very flexible. Every year, the circumstances change. We get different requests for tournaments, but the way we look at it in general is we do ask for tournament bookings earlier. So we have an earlier deadline when we do our seasonal requests so that we can get the tournament booking requests in first so that we can start assessing what those are before we look at the regular seasonal bookings as well. And then we work with each individual group because each year those tournament requests can differ. One year a group may request 2 tournaments. The next year they request 3. They're not always the same tournament. So it fluctuates. Where there's crossover, where in the example you gave, a Friday night might permit, we work with the group that typically has that Friday night permit to relocate them elsewhere. So we manage it on a case by case basis, but we try every season to make sure that we find a balance to approve as many tournaments as possible. Where we may get into a situation where we can't approve a tournament is because there's just too many tournaments requested, and if we took those number of weekends out of the system for league play, we'd actually not have enough time for leagues to be sustainable, and we would end up canceling that league for the whole season, which we can't do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Something that might be contentious, has been questioned for a while, is the use of the town hall meeting rooms for nonprofit groups. So the change will be that nonprofit groups will not be able to use town hall meeting rooms for free. Does that affect a lot of groups? And did you get much pushback on that?
Mr. Furman?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We haven't heard any feedback on it one way or another as of yet. Now, we haven't also formally announced it to a lot of the groups pending council approval of the new policy. It wouldn't impact a lot and we can relocate them elsewhere. One of the main reasons for doing that is because a lot of those requests are for times where we typically don't have staff in the building. So we'd have to pay staff to come in to open the building for a free rental.
Then I certainly support the change in the policy.
Thank you. Any other comments? I have a few. I just wanted to get a better understanding of representative / regional organization. The definition is an organization that does not meet the minimum participation required to be deemed Aurora based, but offers a particular program to Aurora residents that is not offered by an Aurora based group. So is there an actual minimum number of participants that have to be Aurora resident? Or could it be 0 to qualify under that category?
To Mr. Chair, theoretically, it could be 0. I've never encountered that. There is no minimum number because those numbers typically fluctuate all the time, especially in that category. Because there's no Aurora-based group offering that same service, it's indicative of a lot of flexibility within that. Perfect example would be Central York Girls Hockey Association. They don't have enough Aurora-based members to be considered Aurora-based, but they're the only girls hockey program available in town. So that's why we afford that. We have that separate category to capture those groups that offer a program without meeting the Aurora-based criteria.
Thank you. The only reason I say that because when we're categorizing the groups under the allocation policy, obviously the town of Aurora, then we have a whole bunch. That particular non-for-profit representation or representative regional group, non-for-profit youth ends up above an Aurora-based non-for-profit adult. And I'm trying to understand the rationale for that. I guess we're balancing the difference between providing for the youth versus Aurora residents, even though they're adults.
Correct. That's exactly what we're trying to do is still prioritize youth over adults, knowing that those regional representative groups do include Aurora residents. As I said, I've never encountered a group in that category that didn't have Aurora residents within it.
Thank you. I think would there be some value in providing at least a number towards that? 50%, 30%. Currently, at least from the youth side, it's 70%. I'd like to put some thought towards perhaps putting a number on that, as well as at least having a discussion on how you've categorized these and whether or not Aurora based, regardless of if they're youth or adult, should be up one notch as opposed to groups coming out from outside of Aurora that perhaps even have very few, if any, Aurora-based residents. Have you put any thought towards putting a cap on the representative regional, either youth or adult groups?
To you, Mr. Chair, we have given it some thought and determined that it was a very difficult number to reach at a cap because it varies from sport to sport. Some groups may only have 10%, some groups may have 50%, some groups may have somewhere in between. And it does vary from sport to sport, and within a single sport and a single group, it varies from year to year. So it's difficult to really map that out distinctly. It's all what we have in place right now is still fairly consistent with what our past practice has been as well, putting youth before adult and putting these groups before other groups that didn't meet that criteria. We've had we've discussed this with our the existing user groups through that consultation, and they were all very supportive of this prioritization list as it is right now. We did not receive any negative feedback. We were actually kind of guided in this direction by our existing user groups.
I'd suggest some Aurora-based non-for-profit adults might have an issue with where they end up on here. But using that kind of logic, wouldn't it be equal to any Aurora-based youth groups? We certainly say you need to be 70% or you don't get what we would be allocating towards you. What would be the difference between doing the same for groups that are representative of outside of Aurora? Wouldn't it be the same if we can pick a number?
It would probably be a random number. We could certainly consult with groups and see where they're at. But I think whatever number we picked, we would end up knocking out organizations that have historically provided a service that those smaller numbers of Aurora residents still want to participate in. I think where we protect, I understand the concern that maybe the adults group have. Where they're protected is those Aurora-based adult groups. They still have legacy rights. So this really only comes into play when it comes into growth or new time. And we have very few adult groups. There's a couple that experience growth, but they're not going to be negatively impacted unless all those other groups above them are also experiencing growth at the same time.
I guess we could look at it in different ways, bumping people out or encouraging them to promote more, getting more local people to participate in their organization, or bumping them out means having Aurora residents play in their place. I guess there's different ways of looking at it. Just in terms of non-for-profit organizations, it says any incorporated non-for-profit organization or registered charitable organization, proof of status may be required at the discretion of the director. I mean, if they're a incorporated non-for-profit organization, wouldn't we just automatically say you need to provide the proof of your status?
Certainly, we do ask that for new groups. What we don't do is we don't ask our existing groups every year to provide this. I don't ask Aurora Minor Hockey, for example, to provide their proof of incorporated status each year. We know it. We've had it in the past. Typically, if a new group came forward claiming that status, we would ask them to prove it.
Yeah, of course. If we already have it, we wouldn't be asking them over. But if a new group comes, that's kind of not what this says, but if that's what we're doing, that's fine. The other thing, any other group operating in the spirit of a non-for-profit organization may qualify, provided the group is willing to keep detailed financial records showing only incidental surplus revenue on an annual basis. Who reviews those, and is there any value in, and I don't know if we do it for other groups, to have those records publicly accessible?
So this would be new. This would be new because we haven't done this in the past, because this is a new category. So at this point, it would be myself or staff reviewing it to identify if they're falling within what we consider to be a reasonable surplus, and clearly not running it as a private business. I could not speak myself. I would want to defer to the town solicitor on the legalities of making that information public, because that could potentially be somebody's private financial information, that because they're gathering money on behalf of other people. I don't know the legalities there.
Okay. Could you just go over the legacy rights and the rationale behind them?
The rationale within having legacy rights?
Yeah.
So that those groups that have been operating and providing those services year over year to the community have the security of knowing that those facilities will be available to them in future years. And that's why it focuses on the Aurora-based or the regional representative groups that are serving Aurora residents. We want to provide them with the security of knowing that they have the consistency to be able to operate their business year over year without having to ask for their same fields or arenas or ball diamonds over and over again, not knowing whether they're going to be available.
And is there any criteria that we go through in order for them to on a yearly basis to qualify them? Mainly, how many Aurora-based people are playing in their organization?
We don't necessarily ask for everybody's residence list every year, again, because it takes a lot of time to review them, but we do on occasion ask different groups to provide that information. Right now, we do it on an as request basis. Again, primarily it is it's partially a resourcing issue because it's one more step in the process to add to a very busy process every seasonal time we're doing the permits.
Thank you. And my only interest is obviously as most of this is to provide priority to Aurora residents and the taxpayers who pay for these facilities, and to certainly not close the borders to anyone else entering, but to have a priority to Aurora-based residents, being youth or adult. And while it may take a lot of time, and this is one of my pet peeves for years and years and years, is if we don't have that accurate data, all of this to me is almost meaningless, because if we don't reach the 70%, or if the organization can't prove there's 70% of the individuals in the sport that are Aurora based, there's no reason to even be asking. I think we should figure out a way to nail those down so that we can properly administer the policy. Any other comments or questions? Oh, just so I don't have to give up the chair, I will be making some amendments at council when it comes up, and maybe I'd love to have a sit down with you and go over them. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. 9.3, strong mayor's powers, that report number CS 23-069 be received for information. Could I please have a mover and a seconder to put that on the floor? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Kim, any comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I don't want to repeat everything that was said about this. I know that if this was specific to housing targets only, this would be something that I could see that would be something to consider, because we are in a housing crisis and we need to move the housing targets along. However, there is a lot more powers that are given that aren't related at all. And reading this report, obviously, there's a few things that stuck out for me. Receiving this was one of the things that I kind of wavered on, but it's kind of moot. But I do believe it's important that the public has this information so they really fully understand what the strong mayor powers actually do. The one thing that did stick out for me was the legal considerations. And I'm just going to read that. The mayor has a sole discretion in determining whether to exercise the powers under this part of the act. As long as the decisions made by the mayor, any powers exercised by the mayor, including the veto power, are exercised legally and in good faith, the decision or power cannot be quashed or open to any review by a court, even if they may be considered unreasonable. I'm just going to leave it at that. I think that speaks for itself. I think this is a very slippery slope. And I stand by my comments that I do believe that democracy is at risk, utilizing this as a tool in more ways than is necessary. I really urge the public to voice their opinion and read this report for information to fully understand what's at stake.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Weiss?
Yeah, thank you. I have some of the similar issues here, and I realize this is simply a report that describes what strong mayor powers are, but I was really quite surprised when I read deeply on it that from a council governance, which is on page 2 of 6, that the mayor could change the committees, this committee, general committee, that's so important in terms of discussion. And so I'm really concerned about that. Then when it talks about direction to staff, the mayor can direct staff to undertake research to provide advice to the mayor and council. And I just want to get some idea of examples. Maybe it's through you to the clerk about past items that have come before council, such as the staff report that was recommended to perhaps sell this facility here and move it to downtown. So is that the type of a research that would not need council approval, that the mayor could just simply go ahead and ask for research and a report on through you to either the clerk or through Ms. DiRosario?
Ms. DiRosario?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So it's difficult to talk in hypotheticals because basically it has to follow exactly what it says, that the direction can be on a town policy or program, and it has to be related to the exercise of the powers under the strong mayor powers. So if that's something that could be considered a power, if that's something that could be considered being done to exercise any of the powers, then yes, that would be something that could be considered.
Thank you. And so through you again, then who makes that determination of whether it is or is not appropriate for strong mayor powers to be implemented? Through you to Ms. DiRosario, I suppose.
DiRosario?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. In most of the sections, it states that it's the mayor's sole discretion.
Thank you. And similar to that, I saw on page 3 of 6 where the mayor has the power to determine organizational structure, et cetera. One item in there that people are excluded, such as the chief building official. I've never heard this job category. So do we have a chief building official that has been named? And if that's the case, who might that be? Is that Mr. Ramuno?
Mr. Ramuno? Mr. Jean?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's Bill Jean, our chief building official.
Bill Jean, and you.
Statutory
Okay, thanks
position.
very much. I've never heard the term before, so I can now talk to you in terms of your title. Bear with me here. It says in here that the mayor may bring forward a bylaw. So we're talking about bylaws now for consideration of council. If the mayor is of the opinion that the bylaw could potentially advance provincial priorities. Are provincial priorities those that are directly related to the housing target, or are they extended beyond that? So through you to probably Ms. DiRosario or the clerk.
Mr. Duran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. The provincial priorities, actually spell them out in the Ontario Regulation 580-22, and they are building 1.5 million new residential units, construction, maintaining infrastructure to support housing, including transit, roads, utilities, and servicing.
Okay, so it's restricted to that. Thank you.
By December 31st, 2031.
Right. And it says in there that the mayor may require council to consider and vote. It doesn't say may means it's up to his discretion to come forward with
Mr.
whatever
Duran?
that bylaw is and provide and ask council's advice.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the last thing, and I think Councillor Gilliland was driving at it, is the legal considerations. If we if we vote to receive this, are we voting to approve strong mayor powers, or is it, I mean, we've already gone through an exercise some time ago to talk about strong mayor powers and opposition to strong mayor powers. And I'm really interested in what a vote is going to look like and what the consequences of a vote on this this report would mean. So through you, Mr. Chair, to
Mr. Durant.
whomever.
Mr. Durant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're just receiving information. You're not voting in favor of strong mayor powers or anything. The strong mayor powers have been provided. It's just you're acknowledging that information was provided to you at this meeting is essentially what the motion is.
Thank you. No further.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. On page 3 of 5, the bottom, just to like to have to know exactly what this means. No requirement for the mayor to abide by the procedural bylaw and adding the matter to the agenda. Does that mean that the mayor can, I mean, we're always worried about transparency and public input. Does that mean that the mayor could add something actually at the council meeting so the public wouldn't have any notice?
Mr. Durant.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it does.
This is a comment under veto powers. The mayor may veto all or any part of a municipal act, planning act, or development charge bylaw. To me, this is scary and outrageous because these are laws that govern the province. And I think this is a very worrisome development, and I am definitely opposed to strong mayor powers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. At 9.4, CS 23-073 procedural bylaw review. Could I please have a mover or seconder for number 1, that report number CS 23-073 be received, and 2, that the draft procedural bylaw attachment 2 be brought forward for enactment to repeal and replace the existing bylaw. Councillor Thompson, for a second. Councillor Kim, any comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I just want to be consistent in the fact that I've already voiced my opinion that I don't support the strong mayor powers, and therefore I will not be supporting the procedural bylaw change. However, I will support the housekeeping items that are not related in specific in regards to the delegates and the inauguration of November 15th and those as such. So through Mr. Chair and Mr. Clerk, when it does come time to the procedure, I would prefer to have a separate clause, one that's related directly to the strong mayor powers and one that's just general housekeeping. And I'm happy to pass those separately. Otherwise, I'll just be not voting for this as a whole.
Mr. Clerk, can we somehow separate?
It's through you, Mr. Chair, it's difficult to separate specific, amendments or I guess 2 different styles or however you want to put it with the procedure bylaw. I think this strong mayor powers override the procedure bylaw. So regardless of whether they're voted in or not, the mayor will be able to make those I guess decisions that he wants to and we're just trying to add it into the procedure bylaw to make the public aware that it does exist. So I don't think through a series of amendments we could have the councillor vote against him, but as for separating it, I don't think it's possible.
Councillor?
Thank you. Well, if it can't be simple language of procedural bylaw changes that are related to strong mayor power or procedural bylaw changes not related to I don't know why that's difficult. Then I would just not vote for any of the changes, and then we'll go from there. The mayor can do what he wants after that. And right now, for the sake of the purpose of this, the intent of this was to make changes on procedural bylaw for strong mayor powers. So then perhaps it was not really appropriate to put housekeeping things within it, and that can be addressed at a second time. And I'm more than happy at looking at the other things later. But at this time, I will not be voting in favor of this.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. The revision of the procedural bylaw to be in the first calendar year following an election. I think it takes a new councillor or new councillors quite a long time to get used to the procedural bylaw. So I wouldn't like to see it too early in the first year. I wouldn't like to see it in the first year at all. I would like to see it in the second year. And it may be a moot point, but when I was elected, I was the only new councillor. But I think when Councillor Thompson and Kim and Humphreys, and I don't know who else was elected, that there were, I think, 5 new councillors. So in a year where there are a lot of new councillors, to do a revision to the procedural bylaw in the first year, I really don't think it's appropriate. We should wait till the second year. Is it possible that that can be changed through you, Mr. Chair?
Do you want to put an amendment on the floor?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what is the amendment?
So it would be changed to the second year, the second calendar year following an election.
Is
Right.
there a seconder to that?
Okay.
I'll second. I can't. No second. Yeah, you can bring it at council.
No, I mean,
Any other?
for me, no thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Desario. Desario, the Municipal Act specifically says that council must create a procedural bylaw, does it not?
Ms. Desario.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it does.
And to that matter, what's before us is not just simply housekeeping. It's ensuring that we adhere to the legislation and the Municipal Act that has been recently amended and passed with regards to the strong mayor powers, is it not?
Ms. Desario.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you're correct.
Thank you. Council can do what it wishes, but by voting this down, you're essentially saying you don't agree with the Municipal Act.
Any other, Councillor Weiss?
Yes, thank you. I guess this is a good example of something that people may not agree with and the mayor does agree with. So should this not be approved either tonight or on council, am I correct in saying that the mayor could very well veto this if it's not approved, could very well bring this back and veto? I'd like to see how that shakes out, because it's just an example of using the power. So could I get some advice on what will happen if this is turned down and the next steps in the veto process?
Mr. Desario.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. No, this is one of the bylaws that the mayor cannot veto. However, having said that, if it does not get passed at council, the former bylaw will remain, because that's not been repealed. So that the current one will remain as is. However, as the clerk said, it won't have a bearing on any of the additions to the strong mayor powers, because the mayor does still have the legislative authority to do all that. We as staff were just trying to clean up the bylaw so that we didn't have to look at so many places at once. It's almost moot.
Councillor.
Thank you. That's clear, I think. No further.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's great to hear the discussion across the table. but it seems clear to me, and I'm sure it's clear to everyone else, that this is a provincial mandate that's been mandated down to all the municipalities, whether we agree with it or not. I don't think this is something that, our mayor or any mayor necessarily asked for or wanted. It's there and it's part of the municipal act. And it seems, I do agree, it seems kind of awkward that we have to vote on this when we don't really have much of a say in the matter, but it's part of the procedures. That being said, hopefully we have a benevolent mayor, and I believe we do, and I think I think when we talk about whether one agrees or disagrees, I mean, one's assuming that some aspects of these powers have been used or will be used, and that's yet to be determined. And but the bottom line is, I mean, this is something that's been mandated down, and we don't seem to have much choice in the matter. But that's my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
Just some clarification, possibly to the clerk. So this is a power that was offered to mayors. Mayors could accept it or refuse it.
Mr. Duran.
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding was offered to a select number of mayors, mostly larger municipalities with room to grow, but that's just my understanding of it.
Thank you. But within that context, the mayor could accept it or refuse it. I mean, the mayor of Newmarket did not accept the strong mayor power. So it's not something the government says we have to do. Thank you.
Ms. Cesario.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it's not. The strong mayor powers aren't something that a mayor accepts or not accepts. Under the Municipal Act, a municipality is designated to have the strong mayor powers. So Aurora was designated. Whether we wanted it or not, Aurora was one of the municipalities that became designated. There are other municipalities that also said they didn't want the strong mayor powers, but they did receive them because they were designated as of last week.
I'm sorry, to be clear, whether or not a mayor in a municipality wants the strong mayor power, they have it. It's whether they use it or not. Is that correct?
Yes. So if a municipality is designated, they automatically have it. Then there are some of the clauses in the act. There are some powers that are discretionary, except for the budget. The budget is a shall. But other than that, other powers are discretionary.
Right. Just to be clear that it's not something that a mayor has to do. They do not have to use the power.
Through you, Mr. Chair, because I forgot the other time, sorry. Yes, you are correct.
Thank you.
Except for the budget.
It was contingent on pledging the 8,000 homes. If that wasn't done, then they wouldn't have had it. Any other comments or questions? I just have two. I have the same opinion, and to Councillor Thompson's point, I don't agree with the Municipal Act, and I don't agree with what was done. The only one thing that I'll bring up by Councillor, I don't want to give off the chair now, but I will let you know so you can put some thought towards it, and it has to do with notices of motion. I've always believed that notices of motion from us should be treated the same as any other report on a GC, and should be discussed at GC. So I will be asking for an amendment at council, and it'll read something like this: that notice of motion be discussed at general committee meeting and included in general committee report to be pulled at council for further discussion if necessary, as opposed to what we're doing now, which we have the actual notices of motion at GC and we only discuss them at council. I think we should have the opportunity to have a full debate at GC, like every other issue that brings, comes before us. But, well, I could have done it tonight, but yeah. Any other comments? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarity through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Serio. There was some talk about the housing pledge, and if you did not submit the housing pledge or have any commitment to any housing pledge, that was part of the package. As far as I know, we treated it separately, but it seemed to me that Mayor Taylor did not submit a housing pledge and was against the strong mayor powers and felt that it was not necessary. So as a result, he chooses not to accept them by not submitting a housing pledge. Am I not understanding that correctly?
Mr. Chair, if it's quick, because I think we're straying away from a procedural bylaw, but if it's really quick, then let's.
I'll make it quick.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, what I was going to say is I can't comment on Newmarket because I'm not really sure what happened. However, for the town of Aurora and for other municipalities, every municipality, it didn't have to do with the housing pledge. It had to do with the commitment letter. If the mayor committed with the letter, then they would be receiving strong mayor powers.
I think that's pretty crystal clear. Thank you. Regardless of the point, for me, it's the principle. I don't agree with the strong mayor powers. So for me, in principle, I just don't agree with the procedural bylaw change. I'm going against municipal act, so be it. I just think this whole thing is a mistake, and I'm going to stand by what I feel and what I think, and I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no more. Mayor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to bring up one point. If we do all read our procedural bylaw in our current one, it actually states interpreting the procedural bylaw, which is section 4A. In the event of conflict between this procedural bylaw and legislation, the provisions of the legislation prevails. So ultimately, we can have a procedural bylaw that is transparent to the public, allowing them to understand our procedures and what is allowed and what's not allowed. Or we can have a bylaw that is conflicting with the legislation, and we have to follow the legislation regardless.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That fails. Motion to receive. Anybody? Councillor Gardner, second. Councillor Gilliland. Any comments or questions? To receive. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. 9.5 CMS 23-048, feasibility of permanent liquor license at the Aurora Community Center. Could I please get a mover and a seconder for number one, that report number CMS 23-048 be received, and that the staff be directed to run a pilot project to provide alcohol sales at Aurora Tigers Junior A games in accordance with the terms outlined in this report, and that staff be authorized to waive certain requirements of the municipal alcohol policy for the pilot program as identified in this report. Councillor Weiss, Councillor Gilliland, any comments or questions? Councillor Weiss.
Thank you. It's a well phrased document, and I thank them for coming forward with it. My real question is that there's a notion in here about we will have to have additional staff in order to monitor what goes on. Do we have any idea of the cost of the additional staff over these number of pilot projects? Probably to Ms. McDougall, but I'll leave it to the chair.
Mr. Furman?
I say this just because the other costs were in there about the assumption of the special or the permits, but.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I didn't outline specific costs because it may vary. I'm estimating about 3 hours, 3 hours per employee. per night, and there'd probably be 2 of us working. And so depending on who is working to observe and learn from the experience, so that we can provide more feedback, that's what'll be involved. So the amount may vary.
Thank you. And through you too, is there you're talking about engaging a third party, someone to come in and do this who have knowledge, skill, expertise in food and beverage. Do you have a plan to identify who those are so it's open and transparent, and that many people who may be interested in this will be able to get involved with it? I don't want to appear like it's a closed shop. So do you have some ideas about that?
Mr. Furman?
Mr. Chair, for the purposes of the pilot, with limited time to prepare, I have reached out to 4 different organizations, including two community service groups and two businesses. That was the plan, is to figure it out through there without going through a formal process such as an RFP or something, because that would be prohibitive given the time to run the pilot.
Okay, thank you. That sounds reasonable. And the last one is we do pilots in order to identify key performance indicators and why we would go ahead and do this and approve it. Can you give me an idea of what you're looking at that's going to be important here in terms of us coming back with a report and said, this is a thumbs up or it's a thumb down? What are the metrics you're going to be using?
Mr. Furman?
Through Mr. Chair, we're going to be looking at a few things, including one of the primary indicators will be alcohol sales. Is there enough sales to make enough revenue to make it worthwhile for somebody to come in and run and provide that service? We'll also be looking at what would be the costs going forward to continue to operate that. Would there be revenue loss to the town? Would there be costs to the town or not? And we're looking at what feedback from people that are participating and observing behaviors within the facility, because behaviors is already a challenge in some cases without alcohol. So that's one of the important things we'll be monitoring as well.
Thank you. And I did speak to Mr. Thompson about this, and of course he's excited about having it here. And he suggested that, of course, we should be taking a look at attendance, because the purpose of this at the end of the day was to try to boost attendance in there. So if we have some idea of whether attendance is going up or down, or what happens with attendance, I think that's going to be an important marker. So through you, just ask if that's possible, that we can get some attendance information from the
Mr. Furman.
Mr. Furman.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I apologize. That was one of the performance indicators. I just neglected to mention it.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. No further.
Thank you. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Well, I think Councillor Weiss pretty much covered all bases here. I guess the question is, when are you intending on launching this pilot? How long, and how will marketing be performed?
Mr. Freeman?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The pilot would be planned for the last 4 games of the last 4 home games of the Tiger season. So that's late February into early March. And it would extend into the playoffs if the Tigers make the playoffs, so that we can be consistent through the remainder of the season. The Tigers would, because it only really impacts the Tigers, they would take a lead role in marketing it. We typically don't market a third party event, unlike what we did with the town with the Concerts in the Park pilot. That was a town event, so we marketed that ourselves, but we typically wouldn't market a third party event. But the Tigers are aware of it, and I'm in regular communication with them regarding any plans moving forward.
Great. That's good to hear. And at least Mr. Thompson's got some time to get prepared for that marketing for February, early March. Hopefully they do make the playoffs. I know this is something that they have been asking for a while, and hopefully it does increase engagement when you're going to go see a game. We have some great high level hockey here right in our backyard. Not everybody can afford to go downtown and watch any of the NHL games, and watching the extremely great talent we have in our own backyard, I think, is a great night out for families, couples, or anything. And I really hope that this does help boost some of the attendance. And I look forward to those results. And then hopefully this could be something that we can do on an ongoing basis. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm always wanting to support the Tigers, and I'm really hoping that this initiative will drive attendance and provide a service to the community that perhaps in the past we did not focus on. But I am looking forward to staff's report and feedback on in terms of what is that go no go metric that we're going to be looking at, because I recall in our finance advisory committee 1 or 2 terms ago when we were doing due diligence on each of the Parks and Rec services that we offer, whether it be recreational swimming, cost recovery might be 25, 30%, rentals, might be 100% cost recovery. I'd like to know what that metric would be for a service such as this, for it to be a go or no go. I don't know what that number might be, 80%, 100%. Ideally, we like to recover all our costs given the resources that the town's going to put in. But if it's going to be lower than that, I'd like to, have a good explanation and understanding of what that positive service might be. And so I'm anticipating the results of the pilot program, and good luck to you.
There's no question there.
No, just a comment, I guess.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under financial implications, the first one is reimbursement of the third-party service provider special permit cost. Well, that really isn't cost us anything. But with respect to staff, how much do you expect that will cost? And it talks about waiving the need for security guards, but you've mentioned that there have been some problem behaviors. So first question, staff costs, and second question, should we protect ourselves by having security guards?
Mr. Furman.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The costs, there is a cost for the special occasion permit, that there is a cost for that. But for the staff cost, I can only estimate it because again, it'll depend on which staff we get. Probably myself, I'll be there as many and then one other person. So you could be looking at somewhere around $250 to $300 per event as an estimate. The reason we're recommending waiving security is again to keep costs down, because with the current limited the current attendance numbers at the Tigers game, we're trying to make it as affordable as possible so that whoever comes in to do this does not in fact actually lose money on the deal. Given the numbers, we're planning to operate the pilot similar to any licensed restaurant would, because the numbers are within the same boundaries that a restaurant may, and a restaurant wouldn't have security simply because they sell alcohol. Security is a requirement in the municipal alcohol policy, because when the policy was written, it was really addressing those larger events that we have in our outdoor facilities, like a beer festival or a music festival where we have hundreds or thousands in attendance. We hadn't considered this type of scenario when writing the municipal alcohol policy, and I don't believe we don't feel that security is necessary at this point in time. Certainly if observations through the pilot prove otherwise, then I'd report back on that.
Thank you. I thought you said that there were already problem behaviors noticed at the games. Did I get that? Did I hear that incorrectly?
Mr. Furman, even without alcohol, I think.
Through you, Mr. Chair, not specifically at Tiger games, just in general in the recreation field, both here and in other municipalities, we're seeing a growing challenge with behaviors, but there have been no specific issues raised with the Tigers games specifically.
Thank you. And should this be successful and should the Tigers get into the playoffs, at that point, could we have the third-party provider reimburse our staffing costs?
Mr. Furman.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We could explore that option in order to get anybody willing to participate in the pilot. we had to offer to pay the cost. There was, if we put the cost of the permit on the shoulder of the third party operator, I have nobody who's willing to step forward and do it on our behalf.
I get that, but if the Tigers are successful, and it becomes a different kind of story, I think, with attendance. Anyway, we'll leave that.
Thank you. Seeing no more comments, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Furman. 9.6 CS 23-068, amend record classification, structure and retention bylaw number 5815-16. Can I get a mover and a seconder to put on the floor? One, that report number CS 23-068 be received, and that a bylaw to amend bylaw number 5815-16 as amended be brought forward for enactment and reflect the changes noted in the report. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner, any comments or questions? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I just had a question about the collection and tracking of personal information. I know that's something that we did during the pandemic, and it kind of, I guess, proceeded after some of the contact tracing was lifted, but yet we still continued to do it. And then finally with some, I mean, I know I made requests. I don't know what was the final decision making for staff to do that, but I'm just a little concerned with the parameters around this information that we're keeping. If we have any policy or process around that. I'm assuming that most of the public don't want to have their personal information traced. If there was a situation for contact tracing, I understand for public health, but at the same time, I want to know what protections are in place. And if they are going to destroy these records 30 days after, what does that mean? It's very vague. 30 days after what? And how do we know that it's been destroyed? So through you, Mr. Chair, to
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So we take certainly our duty to protect personal information very seriously. We don't want to we don't want to take personal information. We don't have to. This was the contract tracing was something that was basically done across the board, and so we just, like, again, this report just says just codifies that we will delete it after 30 days. It's generally we end up taking contact tracing information through electronic submissions, and so we would just delete them off our servers and make sure they're gone completely. There's no specific way to, I guess, prove that, but we, like I said, we don't want our personal information if we don't have to have it.
No, sir.
Thank you. And if you could just clarify when you say across the board, what do you mean by that? And then second follow-up question is, what happens if somebody does not want to voluntarily give up their personal information to enter a town facility or town property in that situation, and they're uncomfortable giving you that information? Then what?
Mr. Duran.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So what I meant by contract tracing was across the board was that during the pandemic, it wasn't abnormal for any facility, be it a government facility or anywhere else, to ask people about their various contacts in the last, I think it was 15 days or so. But and so, yeah, I just meant to make the point that it wasn't, what the town did wasn't abnormal. And then, and so your second question was, if during the pandemic, if you didn't want to provide the contract tracing, we would ask you not to attend the facility. Of course, that's not the case anymore, but during the heights of the pandemic, I believe that, like I said, that was pretty normal for not just government facilities, but other offices as well.
That's it.
Thank you. And so I guess I just want to clarify the answer to the question. You ask them not to enter the facility, whether it's, say it's a sports dome or pool or whatnot. But they will go in anyway. So then what?
Mr. Duran.
I believe after that was the end of it for on our end. No further action.
So there is no process then, so that person could just enter and go and And they can choose not to give that information if that's correct. Because it's choice. It wasn't mandatory. Correct?
So are we talking about now going forward or
Going
is this-
forward, because this is contact tracing, we're saying we're going to be collecting information for contact tracing during any kind of situation of a pandemic, and then we're going to be deleting this information after 30 days. I'm trying to understand the process. So if someone actually wanted to understand going in and out of facility, could they refuse it? What are those consequences? And then the other question is, how do we know that you're destroying that information after 30 days? I think people want to kind of understand that, because there were a lot of people who are very uncomfortable having to enter their name in an app every single time they're going in and out of a facility, which was also being requested after, I think, across the board, as the terms you're saying, people weren't asking for this anymore. I think we're really late on the game of lifting that. And I just kind of want to understand, because people expressed to me that they felt uncomfortable that we were still collecting this information. There was no disclaimer saying it was going to be destroyed. There was nothing there to make people feel comfortable. And I just want to ensure that in this policy that we're passing today, there brings some comfort in knowing that there's disclaimers there for the public to understand if we are in that situation, that council is also approving a disclaimer of some sort to guarantee that in those specific situations that they are protected.
Mr. Serio.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try to get all of them. So during the pandemic, it was legislated. So it wasn't the town who decided to do it. The province mandated it on every municipality. So that's number one. Number two, we did collect the contact tracing because we were required to do so. And it was deleted after 30 days because, again, the 30 days was legislated. If someone did not want to provide it, then they were not allowed to enter into the building. Again, that was legislated. So they did not enter. We did not let them in. Number four, we don't do it anymore. So we haven't missed the boat. We haven't been doing it since we've had to stop doing it for the purposes of the pandemic. Once contact tracing was no longer required, we stopped doing it at the town. The retentions bylaw, we're just adding it in there in the event this comes up again. So the report does say, in the event of a future time where we have to do contact tracing again, at least it's in the retention bylaw to say that the health records will be only kept for 30 days. Did I get all your questions?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, just okay. I'm glad that you answered those questions about being legislated, and I will follow up to make sure that that is, with the mandatory part. And also, I do remember when they lifted the contact tracing, but yeah, we were still doing it, and it took a couple of weeks or a week or whatever in order for us to actually follow suit. I would just like to ensure that there's some sort of disclaimer there that the public knows when we are taking this information, that they understand that it will be deleted, so they understand where this information is going and where it will end up, because I don't think we provide that information. So I think that's important. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mrs. Serio, is that something within this policy we're going to ensure that the public has a full understanding of what's happening with this information?
Mr. Serio.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So when the next pandemic comes up, yes, we can make sure that that happens, right? It will be legislated again, and we will do what the legislation requires. And if it's to provide more information to the public so that they understand fully what is happening, then of course we would do that.
Thank you. And does that need to be reflected in the policy? Like, for all I know, it could be another 20 years. I don't know. And I'm not going to be around here. But is that something that we need direction to make sure that that's included? Or is that just assumed? Or I just don't want to assume if I shouldn't be.
For sure. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't think it necessarily needs to be in the policy. It's something that we should just be doing in general. We did try to do it, I would say, to do to explain to people what was happening. But if some people didn't know that, then that's fine.
Ms. McDougall, do you have more information?
Through you, Mr. Chair. During the pandemic, there was contact tracing as per the legislation requirements. All the while, there was also requirements to prove your vaccination. When the requirement to drop contact tracing was given for us to stop, we stopped. However, the vaccination requirements to still enter the facility was still mandated. We no longer, there was a phase where we had to stop the contact tracing piece, but we were still required to obtain proof of vaccination. Possibly that's the distinction, but at time of legislation change, we changed our processes. So as far as contact tracing goes, we followed the process regarding legislation. Vaccination went on beyond that.
Councillor?
Thank you. I guess I will I will believe that that is maybe the direction from legislation and staff, but perhaps trickle down to maybe some of the staff at other things. Maybe it wasn't caught on right away, because I specifically remember having to communicate to our CEO that we were still doing this and it wasn't necessary. And it could have been just by a few days, and maybe staff at that time didn't realize, because I remember specifically having a conversation with people saying, why are we still doing this? We don't need to, because they had lifted it. And maybe it was just a lag by a few days, but just want to make sure it's clear that everybody understands. There's a disclaimer. Just when anybody's talking about saving information that's going to be destroyed, people want to know where it's going. And is it going to be destroyed? There's a lot of people out there that are very concerned about their privacy right now and how that's being protected. And I want to make sure that when we are passing this bylaw, that it's clear that we are not retaining any information.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I just as a follow-up to that. So this is a retention bylaw, basically kind of guiding how we and what we do with information that we collect, amongst a whole bunch of other things. It doesn't necessarily speak to guidelines to contact tracing or how we go about doing any of that. It's specifically, we're collecting some data, and this is what's going to happen with that data. I didn't see anything in here in terms of, it's triggered by legislation, or that should someone not want to provide their information, there's either no enforcement because there's no legislation, or we call 911. None of that is in this. I think this is capturing what we do with the data that we collect. So I don't necessarily have any issues with this. Should it go beyond that, I would have issues on how we deal and how we dealt with that whole thing. And to Mr. Serio, I hope we never have to experience that again. So those are my views. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. 9.7 OPS 23-026 winter maintenance of regional sidewalks. Could I please get a motion, a mover and a seconder, to put on the floor, number one, that report number OPS 23-026 be received, and two, that the region of York be advised that the town of Aurora will continue to maintain the active transportation infrastructure, including sidewalks, separated cycle tracks, or multi-use pathways on regional roads as per operational services level standards. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Gardner, any comments or questions? Councillor Weiss.
Thank you. I like this report, and it's great because it helps us manage expectations when we have those big snow load days and all the rest of it, and who does what. So a lot of our residents, particularly the ones that own businesses on the main street of Yonge Street, are always, that's the snow load problem we have, because it is a 4-lane highway. And so all the other circumstances around are 4-lane highways, and they create a greater snow load on sidewalks. So my question to you, or to probably Ms. Teenkamp through you, Mr. Chair, is the service standards that we have for Yonge Street, because I know myself, I have in my ward, I have people on the east side, and Councillor Gilliland has them on the west side. And one of the biggest problems after a snow load day is it takes forever to get the sidewalks clear, and then their businesses are virtually shut down. So do we have different service standards for a 4-lane highway that we're responsible for on Yonge Street?
Ms. Steenkamp.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Yonge Street is considered a primary road. So it does certainly have a higher service level than a secondary road, which would be in a residential area. So those roads could be, or those sidewalks would potentially be cleared 1 or 2 times during a snow event. That being said, it is prioritized, Yonge Street in its own, but it has its own issues because it is a curb facing sidewalk. It's directly on the road. So as you know, it takes the snow load. That being said, after it is plowed, it is prioritized for snow removal immediately. So though Yonge Street is removed because there is no snow storage immediately after the storm within a few days. So it does deliver, or it does receive a higher level of service than other roads.
Great, thank you. The business owners will be happy to hear that and I'll be looking forward to it.
Thank you.
No further.
Seeing no other comments, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you. We got one more. We're going to try to get through it. 9.8 PDS 23-136 application for draft plan of condominium Silhouette Aurora Inc. 15086, 15094, and 15106 Yonge Street. Part lot 1 and 2, registered plan 9, and lots 51, 52, registered plan 246, file number CDM-2023-03, related file number SP 2018-03. Could I please get a motion, mover and a seconder to put this on the floor? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gilliland. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. We have one notice of motion from Councillor Gilliland, which we will discuss at council. Regional report. Could I please get a mover and a seconder that the York Region Council highlights of October 26, 2023 be received for information? Mayor Maracus, second. Councillor Kim, any comments or questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mayor Maracus. It does talk about there was an update on municipal governance review, that there was a public meeting held in Barrie on November 6th, and that it's anticipated additional public meetings will be planned for jurisdictions within York regions, just whether it be yourself or the clerk. If we know of one that's coming, can you be sure to circulate the date amongst members of council?
Mayor Maracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that question, Councillor. Absolutely. I know that some other dates in some other areas such as Vaughan and Markham have already been provided. I will provide those dates to council members, and I'm sure the clerk, once he gets those as well, and they get distributed from the region to all of us, we'll make sure that every member gets that, as well as members of the public. It's going to be an interesting conversation.
Thank you. No other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. New business. Councillor Kim. Mayor Maracus. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a call from a resident today who's tried to get hold of the water department 3 times in the last week. She did have one call back, but she wasn't there. It shouldn't take a resident a week to get in touch with the water department. And somehow through the conversation with staff, I don't know who it was, they said that a councillor has the power in changing what the water department has charged a resident. And that's absolutely untrue. So could somebody please make it clear to everybody who answers the phone that that is not true?
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I've had a few residents asking questions and reaching out to me, obviously, about the budget. It's different this year, and wanting a little more specifics on the Aurora Town Square. And, the public does find it a little difficult to filter through all the separate little subjects, whether it be capital, staffing, operations, debt repayment, and so forth. And so I've had several residents want to have some sort of information report, kind of bundling everything together so we can have an update and see if we can put operating, capital, staffing, debt repayment, and the celebrations all in one report showing what those dollars are, what we spent up to date, and what do we anticipate between now, 2024, 2025, and 2026, and understanding what that impact is on the levy and the amount of dollars spent. Is there a way that staff could bring something to put on the agenda for information for a GC or a council meeting or budget for information in the next coming weeks?
Ms. McDougall.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we can compile the information into a summary for you.
That'd be great. And is it something that we could expect? Could we get something like that next GC?
Ms. McDougall.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the clerk. It's certainly something we can compile. Whether I can get it back and through the approvals in time, it has to be issued next Tuesday, I think. So it only gives me a week to pull it, but should be okay. I just have to work with staff to compile with finance and Phil, obviously.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Councillor Weiss. Okay, public service announcements. When we start over here, Councillor Weiss. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Because sometimes we don't get an opportunity to do that. So I just wanted to remind everybody once again on November the 18th, Saturday, November the 18th at the Aurora Community Center, I'll be hosting a YRP session called Operation Auto Guard, special units that is specifically geared towards auto theft. That's something that a big program they've put together in order to educate the public on various ways to protect yourself and your vehicle and any other kind of situation, as well as giving away free Faraday bags as well. And this is going to be right before the Aurora Tigers game. So again, we want to partner with them in order to get some great information on how to protect yourself with your vehicles and theft. And also you could enjoy an Aurora Tigers game that evening. So it's Saturday at 6:30 on November 18th till about 8. And then you can follow up watching the game.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
We are in the Hindu celebration of Diwali, and it is the Hindu festival of lights. But I must say that variations are celebrated in other Indian religions. It symbolizes the victory of light over darkness and good over evil. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Councillor Thompson. Mayor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a reminder to residents 65 and older or those with a disability, applications are open for Aurora's windrow removal pilot program until the end of the month. The program will clear 1 car width of snow from the bottom of the driveway so residents can get in and out safely. And you can learn more at aurora.ca/windrow. Help make the Santa Under the Stars Parade magical by putting in an entry to participate. We're looking for a few more floats and walking entries to round out this festive Winter Wonderland Parade taking place on November 25th. Register by November 12th to be part of this incredible celebration. For more information, you can visit aurora.ca/Santa Parade. Also, if you have a bit of that Griswold spirit and like to decorate your house for the season, consider participating in Aurora's Deck the Halls tour. Great cash prizes can be won. Apply by November 12th at aurora.ca/Deck the Halls. Also, applications for the Community Partnership Grant are open. And if you are Aurora serving organization or an individual with plans for an engaging community initiative, this opportunity is for you. Up to $10,000 is available and the deadline is December 1st. And you can apply at aurora.ca/community grants. As Councillor Gardner mentioned, happy Diwali to everyone celebrating in our community on November 12th. And for those marking a new year, wishing you a happy, healthy, and prosperous year ahead. And last but not least, it's an important one, I think, for our entire communities. On Saturday, November 11th, the the Aurora Legion is hosting its annual Remembrance Day parade and ceremony. Everyone is welcome to attend. And the parade starts at 10:20 a.m. at GW Williams High School, marches south on Yonge Street to the Cenotaph for the service. And I believe there is also a gathering afterwards, after the service at the Legion as well. So I'm sure the entire community will be out there to pay their respects and honor our veterans and those that paid the ultimate sacrifice.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. No. No closed session. Could I please get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Gardner, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor, opposed, that is carried.